Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening in, whatever time of day, whatever time of the year it is. And thanks a lot for coming to our educational session around accounting for inventory, around stock management and inventory. I'm going to be hosting today. My name's Matt Flanagan, and I've got some gurus from different parts of the world of implementing inventory, linking with the accounting systems, from implementation to fix up to ongoing maintenance of these types of setups and systems. So without further ado, we'll go into the agenda and then you can speak to these guys. So we've got the intro, which we're going through now. We're then going to discuss understanding product-based businesses in a post-COVID business environment. So what have happened to product-based businesses post-COVID? Moving product-based businesses from traditional systems to modern ones. So this is from either the server-based systems into the new SaaS-based world that we've got, guiding software selection and transition, and strategic seamless system implementation. That's what we're all aiming for in the world. How many are completely seamless? I'm unsure, but we'll discuss that today. So who are we? I'm Matt Flanagan. I'm MD of Bluehub. We're implementers in the Midlands, in the UK, and we primarily work with the DIA Sin7 core system and the ecosystem. This is a picture actually from Digital Accountancy Show a month or so ago, which was a really cool hot day. Obviously, I had a more tan back then as well. I can see how white I am. But to my left on that was Hilary. So Hilary, introduce yourself.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm Hilary. I'm the founder of Bridge Financials. We're accountants based in Scotland, but we specialise in systems and process reviews and then migration and implementation of software based on Xero and its ecosystem.
Excellent. Callum was next on that list there. So Callum, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Callum. I'm one of the ERP specialists at Bluehub. I've been working at Bluehub for about 5 years now, so I look after all our initial conversations, all our scoping work, and also complex discussions around requirements and essentially helping people get onto the cloud of inventory systems and any other surrounding gaps also.
And last but not least, we've got Philip Oakley. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, Philip Oakley, owner founder of Outserve, another cloud integrator, again based in the Midlands. But our focus is on Unleashed and A2X, working with many e-commerce businesses. And
perfect product set there in the background as well, Phil. Perfectly done, well done. Okay, so that's the crew. So we've all been doing this a number of years, right? So from different backgrounds, different arenas, but essentially helping people with the inventory world that's linking into primarily Xero and a little bit of QBO. So there's quite a number of years experience based on how young actually this world is. So just going to go around. What types of clients are you working with? So we're interested in the sectors, maybe the type of business, sort of size range, whether that's turnover, employee size. Hilary, I'll come to you first. We'll head to Scotland and get the information from there first.
Yeah, I mean, because we don't just deal with inventory, we deal with clients across all sorts of sectors. It's not sector specific at all, because we're looking at the whole systems and processes. Generally, we do a lot of approvals and so on as well. Size isn't a factor. It really is what are their requirements in terms of the technology. We work with a lot of not-for-profits, arts organisations, hospitality, food, wholesalers, e-commerce, service providers, consultancy. So we've got a really broad base of clients. In terms of the inventory specifically, we've got a lot with sort of the wholesalers and the e-commerce, and I think that's really what's driven this sector a lot in the last little while, certainly for us.
Yeah, I'd echo that around e-com. I think it's been a bit of a growth period for that, certainly COVID. Philip?
Yeah, I think mirroring some of Hilary's sort of experience, but I think we would say we are more focused on the product businesses, so we don't generally have many clients that are outside of that, and particular sort of sectors we could talk about, sort of food and drink, particularly beverages, from everything from coffee to oat milk to fizzy drinks to alcohol, non-alcohol. It's been a big growth area for us, particularly using these products, particularly using e-commerce platforms as well, as often a multi-channel sell. But many FMCG, beauty, fashion, apparel as well. And we do work with many international clients where we see really, the opportunities for UK businesses to go and sell all across the world, which we see a lot of that with e-commerce, but also international businesses, helping them come to the UK and Europe. So there's some really good opportunities for businesses at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Cal.
Yeah, so very similar to Philip, really. We primarily work with product-based businesses, sectors. There isn't a specific sector that we like to work with. We work with anyone from in the motorsport industry to coffee, as Phil was saying earlier, to people who sell necklaces and rings and write your name on them. So it can really be a mass variety. We do lots of work with manufacturers as well, so helping them track all of their important information, lots of wholesalers, lots of distributors. Turnover isn't a real factor, but just based on that we are a service, we tend to work with businesses anywhere from around about 2 million to 50, 60 million turnover on these systems.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Next question we have. What are we seeing in the challenges and change in businesses, product businesses for post-COVID? And I think we already touched on it, like e-com was a huge boost during COVID because we went to much more online sales, and even things like Zoom and Teams and the Google Meet, they all became like a second nature to us, which I think we had struggles with before. So I think in general it's been like a societal shift. But what have we found in the in those challenges and changes with these product-based businesses since the COVID started? And I'll start with Phil to this on.
Yeah, and I suppose we should acknowledge there's been other factors at the same time post-COVID. So just as we're dealing with post-COVID changes, we've clearly got the Brexit issue in UK and Europe. We've got the cost of living crisis, which has a lot to do with the energy prices, and some real other factors as well, which is, I think people sometimes, supply chain shocks. It really has been up and down, and I think, as you've noted as well, many e-commerce businesses actually benefited financially through COVID, certainly in that consumer, because where else could consumers go? Clearly, if you were selling to the high street, there was a massive change for you. But if you were selling direct to consumers off your own platform or to Amazon, that went up. Of course, then pretty much unexpected for some, it would appear, that dropped off the edge of a cliff as soon as COVID then finished, where people did go back to the shops and become a bit more traditional. So just seeing this roller coaster really, and the ups and downs of the costs, the supply chain costs, the increases that we've seen. I think that sort of dirty round figures is before COVID, you could talk about, say, $2,000 from a container from China. At its peak, it was $20,000, 10 times more expensive to bring a container in from China. That could wipe out the whole profit on that container.
Hilary, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Phil's covered, what most of the challenges have been. But I think actually there has been maybe a change because of the technology that people are much more willing to use now. There's a lot more use of cloud technology, and therefore people have been more inclined to look to the cloud platforms for something like inventory management, which they maybe wouldn't have done in the past. So I think that shift that we saw through COVID in how we communicate with each other actually has been beneficial. But alongside of that, you have got all of those challenges that Phil talked about. We've got the supply chain and the disruption, not just in things, but in people as well. People's ability to be in the right place at the right time. And just the paperwork, how many clients have been trying to export or import? And I can think of one client, they kept on having something returned from Germany because it had the wrong paperwork. No one could tell them what the right paperwork was, but they kept saying it was the wrong. So you've got to have that flexibility to be able to produce and respond to those needs when people just don't know what they are, up front. So that's been really challenging for businesses, I think.
Yeah, same question to you, Carl.
Yeah, I think Phil hit the nail on the head really there with all the main challenges that we've been experiencing. Then, as Hilary mentioned, more people are then making the move and looking at these ERP systems, but that actually created a new challenge and a new problem for us, that businesses have so many ERP options to look at and inventory options to look at. So that was a new challenge that was actually created, and it's still ongoing. And not just ERP and inventory systems, you've also got e-commerce channels, because if someone sells on 6 platforms, they then have to try and match those 6 platforms to their inventory system, because not everything integrates with each other. So it created a new challenge that's still ongoing now, with people exploring and looking at this journey. And hopefully that's probably why they're listening to this recording, because of that challenge.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's just been a huge wave of change, hasn't it? And I think that's a societal shift. And I think that, like Hilary mentioned, COVID did bring people closer to technology, and you had to use it, really. So I think that has brought people into this mindset of it's at least worth exploring. But like Cal says, it brings its own challenges now, that there's a lot to look at, and how do you make a decision on that? So, okay. So just a bit of what software are you guys regularly advising and implementing? So I think we know Phil's got any tattoos as well he can show of other products. But Hilary, what are you guys working with primarily?
On the inventory side, we work with Unleashed. But what we find is that you can't just look at Unleashed in isolation. So we are, with something like e-commerce, we've got clients working with something like Link My Books. But then we also get involved in the whole purchase to pay process, of which inventory purchase is a part. So we do a lot around approvals, Approval Max, and Zahara. And then the payment side, we get involved in the Telaroo and the Wise and so on and so forth. So we've got quite a broad sweep of products that we work with right through all business processes. But for us, Xero is always at the core of that. And most importantly, probably really, is the reporting. Because with so many of these systems, you're collecting all this fabulous data and you don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to get it out. And some sitting in Unleashed and some is sitting in Xero, and different people have different needs. So we do a lot of work with the reporting apps. Financial side, we look at maybe Fathom, Float. If you want to look at Unleashed and Xero together, we do quite a lot with Wink reports. And then we work with Tide in terms of getting data in. So there's lots of different, Unleashed and Xero might be at the core of that, but there's all this stuff around the periphery as well, which is just as important.
Oh, okay. Cal, question to you.
Yeah, so as Hilary's mentioned there, the majority of our clients actually come to us already on perhaps an accounting platform, and then also e-commerce channels. So at its core, we implement Sin7 Core, previously known as Dear Systems. Then there's also an abundance of other apps that we work to, meet all of their requirements. So we do a lot of work with Ship Theory, ShipStation for connecting to their carriers. We do a bit of work with Zedelo, so that's around OCR technology and automating processes. And then there's some other apps that we use, like Zapier, for instance. If there isn't any native integrations, that's where you can come up with really cool and weird and wonderful solutions, for helping those difficult requirements. So yeah, at the core, we work with Sin7, and then we have different apps on the surrounding that we work with also.
Yeah, Phil.
Yeah, I think as with Hilary, our core inventory is Unleashed. But as my tattoos and banners show, A2X is very much a big part of our world for the e-commerce integration, especially internationally when we think about international tax. But I think Hilary really picked on a really interesting challenge around reporting. As I say, before COVID, lots of people using maybe one core sort of cloud product like a Xero or a QuickBooks, where since with inventory, and certainly sometimes when you get involved with inventory, you often have other integrations, and that is having this data in so many different places. And with some of our international clients, then you've got different entities, so it's times by 2, times by 3. So they've got 3 or 4 Xeros, 3 or 4 Unleashed, and 3 or 4 Shopifys, multiple Amazon channels, and so our specialism there is now consolidated reporting with Microsoft Power BI, and with what Microsoft is doing now around some of its latest launches around Microsoft Fabric, some of the artificial intelligence and the cloud. We're seeing huge benefits to just consolidating that data and reporting on it, because you say there's some great reporting in all of these platforms, but it's just the reports for that platform, and people need to see the information together.
Yeah, good point. We're going to touch on report a little bit later again. I think it'd be worth going into that. And I think that consolidation piece is really interesting because consolidation wasn't really a requirement for going back a few years. And now we are seeing that growth into different territories, different business setups that is going to be running through. So for those of you listening, there's quite a range there. And what you will hear is it's not just one product. Normally, when you get into this world of Unleashed or Deers or whatever it might be, there's normally the ecosystem which starts to play a part around that as well. So it's very rarely just one product and linking into your Xero, your QuickBooks. There normally has some other of the apps need to play a part with that. So yeah, thanks guys, that was really useful. Why are people moving to these systems? Like what are the triggers? Why is someone coming to us and saying, hey, I need to look at this? Or what are the pain points which are moving people to be thinking about that? So Phil, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, obviously we can talk about sort of the clients who come to us, and I think you sort of mentioned it about size. We probably see them as they come to a certain size where they're looking to shift gear near enough. And I think we all see this up to a certain level. Businesses can generally cope on a good piece of accounting software, probably some spreadsheets and a bit else. But of course, if you're growing and you're going to get to a certain point of volume or need that efficiency of effectiveness, you'll get to a tipping point where it is just too painful. You can keep throwing people at it, and as we all know, recruiting and retaining good people is another challenge for a business. But along that way, I think there's that point where people go, we literally can't cope, or we do not have the ability to grow as we want to with our existing systems. 10 years ago, they'd have been out there looking for maybe mid-tier and a very, very big investment on initial software license and implementation. Of course, the world has changed in 10 or 15 years. So actually, I could take a cloud product and inventory management to really take that business forward. Obviously, this is before we get talked anything about ERP and SAP and Oracle. This is this next sort of when you're in the multi-million type business moving up. And some of the businesses we meet, due to that success, they're in quite a bit of pain, because they are trying to manage things on spreadsheets. They're doing things very manually, and the volume has just created a difficult business to manage, but most importantly, difficult to go any further with to get to that next level. Does that resonate with other people?
Yeah, Hilary, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, absolutely agree with what Phil said there. But I think the other thing that's driving a shift is legacy systems, unsupported legacy systems. And we're seeing a lot of change in that at the moment as well. And I think when people are making that sort of change, they're looking around, they're suddenly realizing what is available on the market at a fraction of the cost of those systems that Phil was talking about, those ERP systems, when there'd be a lot of noughts on the end of any implementation and then potential annual licenses as well. So I think, again, that's causing a big shift at the moment to the cloud solutions.
Yeah, Cal?
Yeah, I think the common trends that Phil hit the nail on the head with is pain. I think every client I speak to has pain in some form or another, not physically, mentally.
Hopefully
but
not.
Yeah, well, hopefully not. But if they're on spreadsheets, they're going to have pain because it's not live. Someone has to update it. If they're on a legacy system, like Hilary said, they're in pain because it doesn't connect to anything that they've got. So everyone has some form of pain that they're going to then trigger to actually move to this platform. And also, as Phil was saying, is just like general growth, so that people are selling more online now, so they're having these legacy systems or even spreadsheets that are just completely disconnected, so someone's having to pay someone to manually enter this information. And then as the business grows, more 10 plus employees, everyone can't communicate on a live Google Doc. It gets quite difficult, and it's always someone's responsibility to update it. So when you have these systems now, everyone can be logged in, it's live information. And also, as a business grows, they're going to want more visibility on how they're operating. So it's how much is it actually costing us to operate, whether you're a distributor and seeing what your landed cost is and what you've paid for that item, or you're a manufacturer and you want to see how much that machine is costing you, or how much Jim in the warehouse is taking to actually build that item. So there's lots of different reasons, but they're the key ones that we actually see.
Yeah, so disconnected systems, out of support systems, legacy systems, no system. I think we've seen some coming, Phil mentioned that things where people have gone up the chain, and I think we're seeing people come down that chain again and go, well, I've been on that for 5-10 years. We've never really hit the levels that we need to actually fully utilize it. We'll come out of that. I think another one that we've just started to see, and I think it's out of the educational piece that COVID's brought around technology, is somebody might quite like a part of the ecosystem, which is like a cloud-based or a SaaS-based type of system. And they start looking for something that integrates with that, whether it's a sales channel, whether it's an e-com, whether it's a shipping app, and what else can I do off that? So I think this sort of integrated world, people are starting to think about. And I know that people will come to us with a list where they can go, oh, it needs to integrate these 4 or 5 things. And that's like where they've started. And I'm sure you guys are also seeing that as you go through it. So whole host of reasons, really.
It's actually a good point that you mentioned there as well, and it relates back to the COVID challenges that you were mentioning too, that people are coming down the chain. COVID actually created a lot of false growth. So a lot of businesses grew in COVID, astronomically, and they pumped all this money into these big systems. And now we're coming off the back end of COVID. Unfortunately, it's not sustaining that level of growth or level of order numbers. So a lot of people are actually stuck on NetSuite or these large systems and having to come back down the chain because the cost no longer is justified to actually use a system. Yeah. We've actually seen that a lot this year. So that's another interesting one.
Excellent. Okay. When to move from Xero or QBO or a cloud-based app? I've just used the same thing that we used at the digital accountancy show. But what's triggering people? If somebody's sat there on Xero or QBO at the moment and they've got some sort of stock element, what will be the trigger points for them? And I'll start with Hilary on this one.
I think if they find they're doing a lot of stuff offline, so they're having to use spreadsheets to track things, they may be having to use Word to produce documentation with delivery, anything like that. I think once you start, Xero as an inventory product is not sophisticated. So if you need anything more sophisticated than that, if you need maybe bill of materials or assemblies or any sort of product tracking, anything like that, then you need to consider looking at another app. And I think you'll probably find a lot of people will be managing those sorts of processes on spreadsheets. So, and when we do any work with anybody with systems, whatever they are, one of the things we always say is, where are you using spreadsheets or other documents?
Excellent. So if you're using Xero, but you're doing everything around your stock control, stock management, stock visibility, offline, whether that be a whiteboard, Google Sheet, Excel, whatever it might be. Okay, Cal, you?
I think it gets to the point when the cost of someone actually keeping those spreadsheets up to date is a full-time salary, and then you can take that salary cost and put it into a system. And as Hilary mentioned there, depends on the business. So if you've got bills of materials, if you batch or need serial traceability, that are types of things that are going to make you want to look at these systems, because they do actually offer you that functionality. If you're selling on multiple selling platforms, again, you're going to want a central a system to actually plug all of those into. If you have maybe more than 5 to 10 employees in the warehouse where there's a picking process, again, you're going to want an inventory system to incorporate, specific pick lists. Again, as Hilary mentioned, save going into Word, typing that all out. These systems can actually do that for you and automate that and just make it more efficient as a whole.
Yeah. Phil?
Yeah, and I agree with everything Callum and Hilary said. Just to make the point, we're not moving away from Xero or QBO. This is in addition to, and obviously products like Xero for most of the clients that we're talking to is always going to be the financial tool. But I think to make the point, and again, if you are on Xero and using its inventory management within Xero, and that's working for you, you probably don't have an inventory management requirement. Because I think Xero, would be very honest, Xero is fantastic for financials. It's not designed to do inventory management in the way that we're thinking about it. And actually, Xero is a great financial tool to do your VAT return, your management financial reports, and your year end. It's not a tool that I see as designed for the businesses that we're talking to do your day-to-day actually running your business, as in real-time stock levels, margin reporting, what products have I got, what products, which customers are having good profit. It is the difference between a very solid financial reporting system like Xero to what is as we're talking now, inventory management, real-time systems, giving information that allow you to make strategic decisions at a product and customer level. I just don't think you're going to get that information from a Xero on a day-to-day basis. That's not detracting from Xero. It's great at doing. It does what it says on the tin, but it does not move into the areas that we've been discussing today.
Yeah.
Can I
Go on,
just add
Hilary,
on that?
yeah.
In the old days, Sage used to refer to its modules as financials and commercials. And I think actually that's what we're talking about here. Xero is our financials, Unleashed and all of that app ecosystem, that's our commercials. And they have different inputs, they have different requirements, but they are all still part of the same business. You know, and I think what we've talked about in the past is this danger in businesses that things are compartmentalized. What this gives us is the opportunity to pull it together, but we still do have different requirements for the financials and the commercial side of the businesses.
Yeah, agree. I think it's a good way of thinking about it. I think also we've got QBO, you know, they brought Trade Greco, and there's a QB, is it Commerce? I think it was. And again, that's sort of an entry level. And I think that by their admission, it was that sort of less than 5 users type of scenario. It's very entry level to get them some sort of inventory functionality within the products. And again, we know that Xero in the US have got their own inventory, and it probably go global. But again, I think they're going to be entry level. And I think talking about the Xero mantra around this, Xero always said we're going to be really good at the financials, and then we'll let the ecosystem be really good at everything we don't do. So they're very much playing that. So they're going to put things in which are going to help them maybe acquire customers with a thought of process up in of progress up into using the app ecosystem, so they can stay on Xero, but then still keep operational commercial alongside the financial. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when Xero bring the inventory product out. But I know the QB Commerce is very much at the very starter level of inventory management and control. So okie dokie. Okay, greatest question ever. And we could be here for hours, so we won't make it a Netflix series. We'll try and keep it within 5 to 10 minutes. But how to approach an implementation. Phil, do you want to give us a nudge on this one?
Yeah, and obviously I'm sure we can all speak about maybe how the client or the customer or even the accountant approaches an implementation. I think repeating what I think we all said at the Digital Accounting Show when we were all talking together, we appear as implementing partners to have a very similar approach to that. And we start with the scoping. And that's to really understand what's involved. I think if any, mistakes can be seen in hindsight, which is a marvelous thing, is people jump in too quickly and, get buyer's remorse, get disappointed when it may absolutely not be the product's fault. And for all of us, I think we're very much led by and also looking at people and process. Systems and software are absolutely key, but we start with people and process and actually understanding a business and going in from an implementation point of view. The people in the business, they understand their business, but they haven't obviously usually got the experience of implementing. We've got experience of the products, but we need to learn about their business as the most important thing. And that is it's an investment of time and money with ourselves, but it's probably got the biggest return on investment and the biggest benefit. And I think we can all probably speak to why that's so important and why and it just shows we all do it the same way, and probably because of years and years of experience. And we know that this has value. And if any client came to say, I don't want to do a scoping, well, it's the Wild West. It's dangerous.
Very. I'd fully agree with that. Hilary, what would you add to that?
Agree totally with Phil again. I would say approach it carefully. Collaboratively involve people. Phil mentioned about getting to know people, getting to know the systems. And again, this is coming back to this whole compartmentalization of businesses in the past. Involve the sales team, involve the warehouse team, involve the finance team. And then when it comes to actually looking at what the products are there, I would say avoid the sales teams. Those salespeople, and when you're talking to them about what their product can do, actually the sales teams aren't the ones that know your business, and they don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of their software. And the software is only as good. How many times have you said this, Matt, as the way it's implemented? And you've got to know that software is going to match your business requirements. This comes back to what Phil said about doing this full scoping review. And it is an investment, and without it, the whole process can be an absolute unmitigated disaster. And it's not like finance, which you can fix with a journal at the end of the year. If your inventory system isn't working, if your sales systems aren't working, your business can go down very quickly.
Yeah, agreed. Cal, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with both what Hilary and Phil have said. I think the major thing here is whether you use an implementation partner or you're deciding to scope it yourself, definitely document your requirements. It's the first thing, first starting point, and put a timeline against those as well. I speak to a lot of people who come to me and say, I think we need this, or I think we need that. We may be doing this. They're not in a position to start this project. You need to be pretty clear from the get-go what you're going in and what you need. So what do we need, from day one? How do we get started? Then what's phase 2 look like, and what are the nice to haves? Always try and aim to replicate what you currently have. Don't get me wrong, you can chuck a few nice things in there just to make things look better, but it should be a phased approach and knowing exactly what you want before you actually speak to anyone. And what Hilary said as well is really important about involving everybody and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
What I see all of the time is I'll be speaking to a sales manager, an ops manager, and a director, let's say. The sales manager will be really sold on HubSpot and think they can use that for all of their inventory system needs because it's got a CRM. And then the ops manager really likes something else, which because it's barcoding, and everyone's just completely disconnected. So everyone really needs to come to an agreement on a system with it and be confident that it has their individual requirements.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it, Daz, the digital accountancy show, where when they haven't spoken, you get them together and they start speaking. You can feel the tension in the room, and maybe some donuts fly across or croissants fly across at each other as they get into it. But it can show that people's perception of what they believe a process to be compared to somebody else in the same business can be entirely different.
Mm-hmm.
I think the key thing with the scoping as well, a lot of people undervalue it, but the key thing you get from scoping is you're going to have a single terms of reference of what you all agree on, that this is what we're going to do, both for the client and for anybody you're going to be working with. The second thing I think you get from people like us is you get an understanding of the ecosystem. So when you're talking to a vendor about one thing, they are binary. This system can do it or won't do it. And if they tell you to the level it won't do it, that's a different matter. But where we're in that is, actually, we could use this system that links in, which will actually fulfill that requirement. So there's a lot more around the whole platform rather than the one single central system. And the other thing that I think we would all do is set expectations as to what this is going to look like. And I think that's the biggest thing is, this will do, you've got 10 key things, we can get 8 done. The 2 that you've asked for here, I'm not sure we can get them to the level, or there's workarounds that you need to consider. At least at that, there's an informed decision as to whether you can do that. So I think all of that is really important. You need all the people involved to get on board and get online, the key people who own those processes, get something written down that you all agree on, and then understand what you're about to receive, because these systems can be configured in all sorts of different ways. Without knowing what you want, what the end game is, how can you set these systems up, whether there's integrations or otherwise? So I think I think we fully agree, but if a company's watching this, or an accountant or a bookkeeper, and thinking about not scoping, I think Hilary's words were a world of pain. It is, because you don't know. And Cal, we've just had a project literally within the last few days where they had chose the system directly with a vendor without actually any external input, hoping to go live in the next couple of months, and they've just pulled the whole project because you can fill in the gaps. But essentially, we've just really given some consultancy to say it won't do it that way, it will work this way, and we've told them the real truth, and they've actually now not gone ahead with the implementation, which sounds like a failure, but actually for that business it's a real positive, because they're about to waste a whole lot of time, effort going through that. It was quite interesting, wasn't it, Cal, when we were talking through it?
Absolutely. I definitely think if you're an accountant, bookkeeper, business owner, or just considering this software move, definitely consider the route of using a partner, whether it's one of us or somebody else. I'd highly recommend it, because we're going to give you a completely unbiased view. It's in our interest to deliver that piece of software. You're going to be satisfied. Whereas, directly with the software, they might have different intentions. So we want to make sure we're getting all of the information out of you, making sure it is going to work, and that we're actually going to have a successful implementation at the end of it. And that client that you just referenced, if they'd have come to us perhaps 2 months prior, they possibly would have saved themselves a lot of money because they've already invested, thousands by this point. So I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So what's the advice? We've actually given some advice, probably jumped the gun a little bit on that. But basically, this is advice for anybody who's contemplating, we want to look at these types of systems. We're thinking about what to do. Like what's your recommendation? Phil, start with you.
Yeah, I think we can think of many, and as Callum said, actually, reaching out to partners like ourselves and others are very one. Maybe again a bit of an old school idea of whatever, but definitely also reach out to existing users of the software. I'm sure all of us have got reference sites that we could go and give, and the more that they can be similar, not necessarily in always, it could be similar in size, similar in volume, it could be similar in product, it could be similar in different ways, but go and talk to some users, because I think that, and again, as you say, it can be warts and all sometimes, that there is no 100% perfect fit. And especially for the money that we're talking about, and understanding how it is helping those businesses. I think that would be tip number one, is go and get a reference site and go and speak to a user of this software and see how they got on. Yeah,
great tip. Hilary?
Yeah, I think particularly if you're sort of an accountant in practice and you're looking at doing implementations with your clients, don't underestimate how much time you need to spend really understanding that client's processes. Because as accountants and bookkeepers, stock can become that balancing figure on the balance sheet at the end of the year. But for the business, it's a dynamic number, and it can be the difference between success and failure of the business. So really understand what stock does in the business, how it's managed, how it's handled, what are the significant KPIs, what does the client need on a day-to-day basis. You're actually getting much more into the management account side of things rather than the financial stat accounts type. And it is a very, very different area of accountancy. And I think it's really important to understand the importance of stock to the business, and therefore understand the processes around it. And don't underestimate, if you are doing it, the value of what you're doing, as long as it's being done well, but as I said before, don't underestimate how bad it could be if it goes wrong. So approach with caution.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the caution around the timeline, the actual investment of time that you've got to put in, as well as then your partners who are going to help you implement that. Cal, from yourself?
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that everybody said here, and the only one to add is cost as well. Educate yourself with the costs of these systems. We get a lot of people put off when we tell them the cost of these systems because they're on Xero. Xero costs £22 a month, and it's understanding the benefits that you're actually going to get. So educate yourselves as well before you go and speak to partners or anyone. It can be really useful to have. And for accountants and bookkeepers, the biggest one is understanding that not one system is going to fit all. Sometimes we see people fixated on one system, and they'll try and get all their clients on it because it's going to be easier to manage and it's easier for them to support, but it's not actually always the case. And as we've been saying with scoping, there's unique intricacies to each business and these systems, so it's finding the best fit. And even if it means how you have a couple of clients on something else, it's probably going to be better for them in the long run, even if it's outside your expertise. That's why partners like us exist, so we can take on that knowledge and help them with what they need.
Yeah, great point. I think the only point I would add is that I think a lot of people underestimate how maybe different their own process is. When I do a lot of the initial calls with people, when they're thinking about this, and they're like, well, I pretty much just move stuff about, or I just build stuff and sell it. It's like, it's very standard and same as everyone else, I think. But I've yet to be able to use the same workflow, use the same process diagrams for each client dead easy. There's always nuances in there, and I think sometimes that the people not closest to the process have an idea of what the process is and how simple it is, but then when you speak to people actually doing it, there's some little intricacies and variations that you need to consider. So yeah,
that's a good point, actually, Matt.
Go on, Cal.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's a good point. Challenge yourselves and challenge the client, because I hear that so many times is, oh, we just do this. And then I may ask 3 or 4 questions just to find that out. And it's actually not just this, or I'm just any standard e-commerce business. And I ask a couple of questions and then not a standard e-commerce business. So if you're an accountant, challenge the client. If you're someone internal carrying out the project, challenge the people. Don't just take their word that they're doing something. Maybe ask them to get you to walk you through their standard process, or and just knowing no trigger questions to ask.
Yeah, great points. Okay, questions, which you can see are blank. Well, I've got some that have come up during this, so we had some different questions as just a accountancy show. But one thing I wanted to talk about was just around reporting, because I think this is coming up a lot more now, and I think people join the product maybe for some efficiency and some standard order processing and standards processes internally. But of course, once you've got the system for a while, it's all about the data and more informed decisions. So I just want to touch around, there's like operational reporting, there's financial reporting, and that can be different for every single business where they want to see that. And there's sometimes some duplication. Excuse that. So here, I'll ask you first, just a little bit about what you're seeing when you're talking to people about what they want to get from reporting, and maybe some of the differences and nuances within that.
Yeah, it is something that I think we've found that people, they put so much effort into getting a system set up, doing all those reviews and investing all that time and money, and then expect everything to just be there at a click of a button. But what you've got to really focus on as part of that whole planning process is, what are your outputs that you need? Because actually, if you can't get it easily, it will undermine your confidence in the system. So you've got to look at, from an operational point of view, you want those inventory insights and you need them up to date now. Accounting reporting has generally been much more focused on the historic reporting. So you're taking the numbers and then you're reporting on them at the end of the month, at the end of an accounting period or whatever. So I think it's understanding the difference between your accounting system and your inventory system. Your inventory system has to be real time and up to date. And I know the whole point with Xero is it's supposed to be up to date, the whole point of the bank feeds and so on and so forth, but you still often do get a bit of a time lag. Yeah. So for those operational insights, they would come from your Unleashed, from your Sin 7. But one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing, and often comes from poor implementation, dare I say, obviously not by us, is people spend a lot of time reconciling between the two systems because they don't understand the differences between the financial reporting and the operational reporting. Maybe there are timing differences, maybe there are dates differences, maybe someone's gone in and changed a transaction in Xero, so it's now different to how it was in Unleashed. So it's understanding how to reconcile between the two systems, but then deliver those financial oversights within Xero, but with the confidence that they're underpinned by the detailed information that you can get from Unleashed or an equivalent.
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting there about the thinking about where you can get the information from and the different transactional slight shift changes, and it's not always reciprocated. If you do one certainly in the accounting system, doesn't always go backwards into the inventory system. So that's interesting. Phil, what about yourself? Because I know you mentioned like consolidations, like a bit of a thing that you're starting to see a lot more of recently.
Yeah, and I think with the international markets, that's a big thing, because often they may have separate entities because they need to for legally and taxation for these different jurisdictions, but actually bringing that information together. But so much we see it's about being able to make strategic decisions and make decisions as well. And we've always had it that accounting it's fantastic, but it's looking backwards. It's looking about what has happened. We need to look forwards to make those strategic decisions and really understand, especially at the moment, what customers should I be working with, what the products I need to focus on, what areas do I need, and to make that sort of decision of how much can I spend on a TikTok influencer next month, next year. And if you can see your margins and understand, and again, factor in what if distribution costs go up, what if interest rates go up or down, and really make those decisions. And I think, unfortunately, we probably spent a few years, being a bit scared of international markets or trying new products. And if you can at least base your decisions on some data, see, and get that sort of margin and that analysis, I think it gives the people that faith. And of course, If you are looking for investment, which we see many of our clients are, some investment from others, people are going to see some numbers which are backed up more than just a straight line that just keeps on going up. What are the margins? What are the effective distribution costs? What are the effective localized taxations? What's the demand here? And at the end of the day, how are you going to get the return on investment of marketing spend, which is still the lifeblood of most e-commerce businesses? Is some level of pay-per-click or some level of influencer or online, whether it be SEO or any of those, and that's a numbers game.
Okay, interesting. So we've got that type of world now where we've got the different territories and that amalgamation of that information, the consolidation as we call it. Cal, I've got a question for you around just e-commerce. It's more these systems do integrate with all sorts of different things as we go through this. So one of the statements I have is not all integrations are equal. So let's take e-com or sales channels. How we integrate them can be entirely different, can't they? And they can be entirely different experience, how you might integrate with Shopify, or how you might integrate with Magento, or how you might integrate with commerce, or something even bespoke. Like, are you finding that a lot, that's something where people may take for granted, that it's just e-com, it'll just connect, and not understanding the integrations between those?
Yeah, I really wish there was a simple answer to this question, actually, because if you'd have asked me this question, let's say 3 years ago, my answer would have been, they're all the same. They're native integrations. They work absolutely fine. But in fact, it's actually not. So since Evancore is a system that we work with, Shopify is the most common e-commerce channel that we come across, and that tends to have the most robust integration that's been configured, and it allows you to do all these cool different things. However, with platforms like WooCommerce, where there's lots of plugins, we have extreme difficulties because sometimes those plugins don't interact very well with these integrations. Because what you have to bear in mind is these integrations were built by someone just using the API based on an average business, and it's not always going to take into account all these weird and wonderful plugins. So that's where scoping comes into play, and plugging it in and testing it. And then you've also got non-native integrations as well, and figuring out how to actually manage those. Matt's probably smiling because we have a couple of examples of these at the moment where people sell on these platforms, but they don't actually natively integrate. And it's not always the end of the world. There's ways that you can, be smart with it. There's apps on the market like Cartrover, or now it's known as Extensive, where you can actually push your orders to, and then that will connect to your inventory system or order management system and help you automate those orders. There's other options like using your shipping platforms, ShipStation, ShipTheory. They tend to have all of the integrations, and what you can do is put your e-commerce channels into there and then bring them into the order management system, so you're not having to do manual processes or anything like that. So the short answer is no, they're not all the same. They're all different, and I definitely say do due diligence with each of them, because especially if you've got a different website where you've got plugins and different tools that isn't a standard setup.
Okay, last question. Finish up. We'll try and hit within the hour. So we talked about this a digital accountancy show, but basically poor implementations. So a piece of really good software not implemented well will be outperformed by a poor piece of software implemented very well. So even in that, it could be actually a whiteboard. I've seen a whiteboard or an Excel work better than an all singing, all dancing inventory system where it's not been implemented. Like, what is the impact of those poor implementations? So I think we're all seeing more and more of these now, where people have tried or gone a certain route, maybe not scoped it, maybe not had enough resource on it internally. Like, starting with you, Hilary, like what impact are you seeing to those people? And I'll go to Phil, then Callum.
I mean, I can think of one recently, someone that came to us and they'd had a very poor experience. They tried one inventory software, didn't work. They then put in Unleashed. Then they bunged on Link My Books, and then they did this, that, and the other bit. And no one had ever taken that full overview of what was happening with everything. The outcome was the business just had no idea if it was making any money or not. No idea what the margins were. No idea. And they could just look at the bank account, and you're rolling it back to the days of the old bookkeeping where you just look at what's in the bank, because they had no idea what the profitability was. They had no insights into products or anything like that, and when we actually went in and looked at it, the actual setup had actually been done quite well. A lot of thought had gone into it, but it was the integration into the accounting side which was not well done and well managed. But what it meant was it completely undermined their trust in both systems, both in Xero and in Unleashed. So, and it took us a good couple of months to get it sorted out, but now we can prove the data flows. Now they can get reports, and the difference that's made, you know, it doesn't suddenly say, oh, aren't we wonderfully profitable now that we spent all this money and time sorting it out, but at least they know what they need to do now to get it right.
Yeah, it's a bit of a I'd add to that, a bit of a red flag for us is when we've seen somebody who's failed, they said they failed on a previous ERP, like Phil said at the very start of this, you know, a lot of these systems you can be successful with. So if you failed on one, it always concerns us as to why that failed, because you shouldn't have failed. It might be, if you come with a reason it doesn't do X, Y, and Z, it's a lot better than we just couldn't get it to work. So I think that's always a red flag, because it feels like it hasn't been thought about properly, and maybe some internal investment onto it. Phil, what would you say around the impact of poor implementation from what you've seen?
Yeah, I agree with everything, you know, what Hilary said. And I think, as we've touched on in the past, a lot of people are moving to these systems because they want to shift up a gear, and they you know, grow and expand, and you know, it's sort of, they've tried to make one step forward and probably done two back, or put it into to gears. They've tried to go up a gear and actually gone into reverse. And what we've seen is actually poorly implemented software. You know, best case scenario sometimes is it stalled the business and they can just stay, but really it has such a detrimental effect. And what we're looking for really in the businesses that we work with is that they can focus on what they're good at: marketing, sales, brand, product. If you've got a poorly implemented system, I think a lot of your time will be spent now focused on that. It's so detrimental to the core running and everything that you wanted to achieve. You wanted to achieve efficiencies and effectiveness. And unfortunately, you've probably just done the opposite, with a lot of time and effort gone into that. And I do think people get burned, and then they can lose a year or two of thinking that it was the product problem and they're not going to go back. So they've lost that growth. They could have stalled their business. And this is where you think, you know, investment now could make a difference for the next 2 or 3 years easily.
Yeah, I think when people are going through that burnt fail as well, I mean, when these things weren't well, it's still fatiguing. You know, so even when you get to the end and it does what it does, it's still a fatigue to do the change, and it still takes a lot out of you. So to get to the end and for it not to do what you want it to do is like fatigue and demoralization, and then lack of trust. So it becomes like a three-way thing at that point. But these are tiring, you know, they do take a lot out of you as a change.
And if I could make just one more point, I know we've touched on the importance of scoping. We've touched on the importance of good implementation, but nobody should ever forget the amount of work that starts day one when you go live. That is so critical. And that's where I think partners like yourselves is so important. That, I'd say that first 3 months of that go live, that, you know, training is one thing, scoping and all this, using the system live with live products, live customers. That's when you need people like us, probably in that first 3 critical months, for that support. There might be, you know, some issues that come out, but just supporting the team doing that is so critical. And that's where you probably will need more than just a support line from a software company. You need that partner, and we always try to go on site when they go live, or just have that intense period where we know this is when to really make it a success. Again, sorry, another car analogy is a bit like you pass your driving test on that. It's the first day you really start learning to drive, and it's the first 3 months you probably are likely to have an accident. So I think this is where the partners are. So it's a journey, and that go live is just first day, step one of that new journey.
Yeah.
Can I share with you?
Go on, Hilary.
Can I just share with you my analogy? I look at it like having children. So to begin with, you have to teach them everything and they learn from you. But ultimately, your aim is to make them self-sufficient. So you're there if they need you to come back to sort of sort out those problems. But you aim to make them self-sufficient because you want them to do it themselves.
Yeah.
So my analogy is like being a mum.
Excellent. 2 good analogies there. Both to do with growing up, which is quite interesting. Cal, Just
Phil stole my analogy, so I don't have a really fancy one.
right.
Or anything. That's the one I always use. That's actually the one I always use. So maybe I stole it from Phil. I don't know.
Or maybe I stole it from you. It's a great one, whichever way.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. But yeah, there's loads of factors that come into a poor implementation. One is cost. You're going to have to pay for someone to fix it. If you're looking at implementation partners and one person's quoted you X amount and someone quoted you something else and it's much cheaper, it's probably a reason it's a lot cheaper. The same goes for anything. I'm not going to turn that into an analogy, but then you have to pay for someone to fix it, and then you're on a scrambled timeline, stress. With the amount of people that I speak to that look physically and emotionally exhausted, and they've lost confidence, and all the things that we've all spoke about, and also the afterthoughts like accounts. We had someone the other day, they poorly set up the production module in Sin 7, and it was automatically creating stock transfers every single time, and they had 950 stock transfers and stock adjustments that had been posted to their accounts, and they had no idea. They literally had no idea. So it was about £50,000 worth of stock adjustments just in the stock account. It's not real. It's not right. And if they hadn't spoke to us, they might have never seen that, and they would have only noticed it at the end of the year or something like that. So there's so many different things that can come into this, and especially when you're connected to your accounting system, you want to make sure everything's right and you're working with the right person. Or if you're doing it yourself, making sure that you've covered all these areas and taking in what we spoke about today.
Great stuff. Well, I'm sure there's loads of other questions, and if anyone's listening, maybe watching this on a record, just comment on the YouTube, or you can reach out to us if you've got a specific question to any of us, really. So yeah, just to finish up, where do people find you? I think most people have learned a lot about each of you as we've gone through this. But Hilary, where do people find you? We're going to post all of these links onto the description anyway on the recording. But yeah, Hilary, where do people go and find you?
Well, LinkedIn, starting place, find us on LinkedIn, or just find our website, bridgefinancials.co.uk. There's a contact form on there. If you've got anything, we're more than happy just to talk to people, just to have an initial discovery type call, just to find out if we can be of help. So
excellent. Cheers, Hilary. Phil?
I think very similar. Find us on LinkedIn, but if you go to outserve.co.uk and there's a phone number on there, pick up the phone if you want to talk to people. We've got a team of people here who can have a conversation. But there's forms there to book meetings, send us emails. But I'm on LinkedIn. Search Outserve, Philip Oakley, and you'll find us there.
Excellent. Cheers, Phil. Cal?
I'm probably one of the first people you'll speak to if you visit us at bluehub.co.uk, click the button, speak to an expert. You'll probably be speaking to myself or Matt, and if you've got any questions, and also LinkedIn as well, although I'm not as active as most, I probably imagine.
Yeah, same for me. It'll be on LinkedIn or via bluehub.co.uk. And I think that's interesting, just to reiterate, if you are looking, all of us will start with a conversation, not about a project, not about a paper. Let's listen to what you've got, what you want. If we can help, it won't always be us that can help, but we can most likely refer you to the right people, or go to the right set of people. So it's worth a conversation. None of us are hungry sales teams at all. It's always starts with a consultation, which is free, just to understand what you need. So if you do need, reach out. Hopefully you'll find from this session today, none of us bite. Well, thanks all for watching. Thanks to Hilary, thanks to Phil, thanks to Cal. Been great to have you on, and no doubt we'll see you on another recording or another panel session somewhere around the UK or even the globe. So cheers all. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks
very
for
much,
having
Rob.
me. Thank you.